Harvard suggests that I should limit my saturated fat to 7% of my daily calories. 7%. They warn that keto raises LDL, the so-called bad cholesterol, and that it increases heart disease risk. Now, Dr. Ken Berry calls this a saturated fat myth. So who's right? Because if saturated fat is actually dangerous, then millions of people doing keto or carnivore are slowly destroying their heart health. But if Harvard is wrong, then we've been lied to for decades. Now let's break this down. Let's talk about saturated fat and heart disease. Harvard recommends limiting saturated fat to no more than 7% of daily calories because of its link to heart disease. That sounds really serious, doesn't it? But here's what's rarely talked about. Dr. Ken Berry points to two massive randomized controlled trials, the Minnesota Coronary Experiment and the Sydney Diet Heart Study. Now, these were not small observational studies. These were controlled experiments. Researchers took people who were eating saturated animal fats like butter and lard and then replaced them with vegetables, oils, and margarine, which are labeled as heart healthy. If saturated fat was the villain, heart disease rates should have dropped, but heart disease risk increased. Let that sink in. When people replaced their saturated fats with seed oils, the outcomes got worse. Who could have thought? So now we have to ask a better question. Is LDL the problem, or is inflammation the problem? Because LDL is not inherently evil. LDL is actually a transport particle. It carries cholesterol to repair LDL tissue. So when arteries are inflamed from sugar, processed food, seed oils, the LDL shows up at the scene. Now let's take Dr. Ken Berry's example into play. Blaming LDL is blaming firefighters. It's like blaming firefighters for causing fires because they are always there, scene of the crime. Now let's think about this biologically. Every cell membrane in your body is made of fat, and your brain is roughly around 60% fat, and hormones are built from cholesterol. So if I cap my saturated fat at 7%, what exactly am I running my body on? Low battery mode? Humans have eaten animal fat since the beginning of time. Heart disease did not skyrocket until the industrial food era, when sugar and seed oils entered the diet in massive quantities. That timing matters. So now let's talk about micronutrients. Another common warning from Harvard. If you're not eating a wide variety of vegetables, fruits, and grains, you may become deficient in selenium, magnesium, phosphorus, vitamins B and C. Also, I don't know if I pronounced any of that right, but let's go one by one. Selenium. So, selenium comes from soil. Plants absorb the selenium from the soils. Animals eat the plants, and then you eat the animal. But there is a reliability problem in eating the vegetables. The selenium content of spinach or broccoli or any plants depend entirely on what the quality of the soil it was grown in. Poor soil equals almost zero selenium. You could eat a massive bowl of kale and get very little. Animals, however, eat massive quantities of feed throughout their entire lives. Their bodies concentrate selenium into muscle and organ tissues. And organ meats can contain around 100 to 150 micrograms of selenium. So when you eat a steak or liver, you are getting a reliable source of selenium. The animal already did the collecting for you. Next, let's talk about magnesium. Harvard will tell you to eat spinach. But here's the issue. Spinach are very high in oxalates. Oxalates are anti-nutrients that bind the magnesium and prevent absorption. So you can consume about 100 milligrams, but you can only absorb around 20. Now, meat and seafood do have lower total magnesium than seeds, but they have zero oxalates. And your body can actually use what is there. And mackerel and salmon contain around 60 milligrams per serving, and you absorb it all. Now let's talk about phosphorus. This one is almost funny. Phosphorus is abundant in protein. Meat, poultry, or fish deficiency is very unlikely. It's almost impossible because it is found in massive amounts of animal foods. So now let's talk about vitamins B and C. Vitamin B12 and B6 are found almost exclusively in animal products. B12 is essential for brain function, red blood cell formation, and nerve health. Keto and carnivore are actually rich in B vitamins. So the claim that you will be deficient in B vitamins while eating primarily red meat does not hold up biologically. It makes no sense. Harvard, come on now. Now, vitamin C, this one deserves a nuance. It is harder to get vitamin C on a strict keto or carnivore diet compared to a fruit-heavy diet. But if you eat fresh, raw, or rare meats, they do contain small amounts. So organ meats like liver and kidney and spleen, they do contain higher amounts. Note that cooking does reduce vitamin C because it is heat sensitive, so it is good to know. But this is what absolutely nobody talks about. Glucose and vitamin C compete for the same transport pathways in your cells. So when your blood sugar is high, the vitamin C uptake is impaired. But when you lower your glucose on keto, your body becomes more efficient at absorbing the vitamin C. Then you need less because you're not fighting sugar at the cellular doorway. Context does matter, and Harvard is leaving a lot out. Now let's go on to Harvard's next point, liver concerns. They say that high-fat diets could worsen liver problems. Their argument is that liver has to metabolize so much fat it becomes overwhelmed. But let's talk about what research says. A study published in Cell Metabolism showed something very, very fascinating. In just 14 days on a low-carb diet, participants experienced a massive reduction in liver fat, and their inflammation markers dropped. 14 days. 14 days. It gets clogged from lipogenesis, and lipogenesis is the process of converting excess sugar and carbohydrates into fat inside of the liver. So when you constantly spike insulin and feed your body sugar, the liver turns the sugar into fat and stores it. This is how fatty liver develops. Remove the sugar and the liver starts clearing out the stored fat. So the idea that eating fat automatically damages the liver ignores basic metabolic physiology. So let's go over what we have. Harvard recommends limiting saturated fat to 7%. And numerous randomized trials show that replacing saturated fat with vegetable oils worsened the outcomes. Micronutrient deficiencies are far more nuanced than headlines do suggest. And liver fat appears to decrease, not increase, when carbohydrates are reduced. The question is, if humans thrived on animal foods for most of histories, why now are modern diseases exploding during the rise of processed foods, seed oils, and sugars? But no, nobody likes to talk about that. Maybe we have to reconsider what is actually dangerous. Maybe saturated fats were never the villains. Maybe we blamed the wrong suspect. And if that is true, it changes everything. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It was very fascinating to research, and it is insane the amount of context that Harvard left out. And if you do read the article, I will leave it in the description. It is very bland. There's not much spice to it. They didn't add a lot to it. They left a whole bunch of context out, and their argument, it wasn't really an argument. I'm the one arguing with them, but their side was insane. What really gets me is that they say that you will have deficiencies in selenium, phosphorus, magnesium, and vitamin B and C. Now you do get a little less vitamin C, but all the other stuff is abundant in meat products. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you liked and shared. And if I'm being completely honest, I have no idea what to post. And if you do like to see more of me, I would love if you guys left some recommendations in the comments below. It really helps me out. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Grace and peace always.